The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of our guests and panel members and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution any member of the Nova Society is associated with. The material information presented on the Nova Society is for general information purposes only. Reproduction or dissemination for the purpose other than education is prohibited without express written consent of the Nova Society. We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and today as our panel was having that conversation about different demographics, we started to talk about higher education. We talked about student loans and the cycle that student loans have put many members of American society into in an attempt to pay off. We talked about the dissertation process and what we felt about dissertations for the PhD program, and what we felt about the moniker PHD ABD. In other words, PhD, all but dissertation, and how we felt about that. We also offered some ideas on how higher education and loans could be fixed. So let's listen in. All right, most important to college educated.
Student loan forgiveness.
Okay.
And also
to those young enough to still have student loans, yes.
Which, by the way, I do.
Do you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, goodness.
I do as well.
Never goes away.
Yeah. Well, and in addition to that, the recent business at the University of Florida and some of the programs that they've discontinued under the new anti-DEI legislation of the state, I think we're going to also see more college-educated people who are finding themselves unemployed in some of those areas also, coming out around anti-DEI legislation and promoting diversity education.
Okay. The military, most important issue
Wait,
to the military.
I didn't get to say my thing.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The economy.
Economy, okay.
Yeah. And the economy, probably.
And student loan forgiveness, which ties into the economy.
Well, you'll remember when Biden first got elected, he was like, no student loan forgiveness. And then the base was pressuring it. And yeah, we've gotten a couple little tokens. I mean, for me, it's like a drop in the bucket. I have yet to hit all my interest. I mean, I've got a pretty hefty principal. So, it's cute. Thank you for the little tiny loan forgiveness. I know it's more beneficial to, the people who had, fewer loans going into it. And I do appreciate the gesture. But, anyone who's taking an anti-forgiveness stance is going to feel it later.
I think it's more changing the laws that govern student loans rather than forgiving them that really is the long-term answer here. The way that student loans work is abhorrent. It's just terrible. You don't take out one student loan, you take out a student loan for every semester you go to school. And each of them has its own interest. And so you're paying interest forever. And straight through the pandemic, when they had offered, and I said yes, suspend my payments. They kept taking my payments anyway, and then it just never seems to end. It is simply unending, and I called the student loan company, which was like 2 student loan companies ago, by the way, which is another thing, right? Because they sell them all the time. Your loan is always being bought and sold. And I said to the guy, look, I'll pay the entire amount right now, but you have to take the interest off. I don't want to pay the interest that I'm not going to accrue by paying you off right now. And he said, well, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And I don't believe there's another loan that you would do that with. Like if you buy a car, I don't handle the finances here a whole lot, but if I buy a car and I take out a loan and then I say, oh, you know what, I'm going to pay this whole thing off. I'm not expecting to pay the interest on the car for the period of time that I'm not carrying the loan. And I know that doesn't work in other loans. So why does it work in student loans where you cannot pay off the entire loan all at once? There was no incentive to do that, and the interest just keeps rolling up. So that there's certain things about the student loans that they never tell you when you take them out, because I didn't need a lot. I was working the entire time I was at Nova, and I mostly paid my way through. A couple of semesters, I had another year basically where I was working on my dissertation, which is when I met you, Mark. I believe I went down to an RI for no reason at all. I didn't have any classes or anything. I was just kind of bumming around.
You went down for Geronimo's,
right? Or just to see Berna and Campbell again. But those 2 semesters, I think, are mostly when I ran up my student loans, and I'm still paying them off. It really just doesn't go away.
And the interest on graduate is higher than the interest on undergraduate, and then you've got the Stafford versus the not Stafford, and then you've got the private loans, and you get suckered in. I never did private loans, but people get suckered into private loans, and you are stuck forever with those private loans. It's it's a racket, and they know it. And I also would love to see a world, and here's where my socialist surfaced yet again, where we don't have to pay so much in tuition at the outset. So we're not taking so much in loans, so that maybe it is actually affordable to be a constructive member of the economy when you're not drowning in student loan debt after going to school when you've been told your entire life that you have to.
Well, and I think that the way school is done has got to be changed too a little bit. As Scott said, when you go through your dissertation phase, you take your qualifications exams. Okay, fine. Now you're all set to go to your dissertation. You have to take 3 semesters of dissertation. You don't do anything other than write your dissertation. You could have your dissertation written that week after quals, but you still have to pay for 3 terms of dissertation before you can defend. Now, I'm the first one to also say dissertations are the stupidest thing on the face of the earth. And I tell that to every single, I sit on a number of dissertation committees, and I always tell the student, do not try to reinvent the wheel with this thing. It will be the worst piece of crap you're ever going to write. You just want to get it done and get it over with. Because the bottom line is that when you get that book, it's not going to say Priscilla Hobbs. It's not going to say Scott Gershwer, Brooklyn and Weldon, or Mark Baum, PhD. It's going to say MS or MA. Because you haven't gotten the PhD yet until everybody signs it and they give out the book to everybody and they do all the foolishness that you have to do. So in a lot of ways, it's the system itself, the arcane system of a dissertation, the arcane system of you have to take 3 semesters. I know that was the way it was at Nova. You had to take 3 semesters of dissertation after your qualifications exams, even if you were done with your dissertation right then and there.
We had dissertation after our qualification exams. We had classes. So we actually had dissertation dedicated seminars separate from the writing. And so when we were done with those classes, then we were sent off to do writing. So that's when we had a lot more free flowing. So if you walked out of those classes with your dissertation written, you were go ahead and queued up for defense if your committee was signed off on it. But at the same time, we had the conversations ad nauseum about the only good dissertation is a done dissertation. But even for anyone who's going into their dissertation, even with that mentorship, even with, all of the great things, there's so much pressure put on the dissertation that it breaks everybody one way or another. It's a rite of passage that academia still subscribes to, fine, but I think academia also makes it harder than it needs to be as well.
Yeah, right, I know a lot of people who lost the thread in those years.
Oh yeah, they lose. Yeah. So again, there's actually a couple questions from the mailbag that came from this, and one of them is about dissertations from a doctoral student down in Texas. Who was asking, let me see if I get this one up.
Did you go to school with us? He's still trying to get it.
He is still trying to get it. What do you feel? How do you feel? You're all graduate doctorates. How do you feel about ABD?
Okay, so
Uh-oh. That was a quick jump in.
Yeah.
well, I think the idea of AB, like I do think not everyone can dissertate, and I do think there's a point where you have to throw in the towel, and that needs to be okay. But there's something very wonky about PhD ABD that when I see it, depending on the context of when I see it, it shifts my perspective of that person completely unintentionally, right? So I do think that some people just have to be ABD, and that's really cool. But using it as your title, I think we're still in a very wonky place with that in academia as a whole, because you don't want to say you're a master's, because you're not. You've passed your qualifying exams. You're technically, most of the way through. You just haven't done the dissertation. But, on the other hand, why? I mean, I kind of come from the stance, and again, mad respect to anybody who realizes they can't dissertate for whatever reason and they need to stop. I have genuine respect for folks like that. When I was looking at my student loan balance and I was like, okay, I'm literally going to die with these student loans. I'm going to finish this goddamn thing because I'm paying it for the rest of my life. So I guess that's kind of the other thing about it. It's like you're pursuing a credential, you don't finish. Cool. It's a really goddamn expensive credential to give up on.
It is. For something that you don't have to rewrite, history to be able to do. Scott, ABD, like it or dislike it?
I honestly, I don't know anything about it. For me, at my age, I was hustling to get through as quickly as I can. I did all of NOVA in 2 years, and then
I.
And then had to wait to do the dissertation. And I was ready to go. They just said, hey, we have backlog. People have been waiting, and you're going to have to get online and wait for your turn. So that I didn't really. It's not a concept that I've really thought about.
Brooklyn?
Oh, I would finish. I would absolutely finish. It's having the 3 letters after one's name and being able to play the doctor card whenever you want. And otherwise you're just a regular person. But if someone is giving you a hard time, you can pull out that doctor card.
Like the scarecrow.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm still the same dummy I was, but here I got this piece of paper.
Exactly right.
Doctor of Psychology, yeah. I would finish. I mean, having put that much into it, you can do a library dissertation. You don't have to do what I did, which is go through the IRB, and that takes a lot longer to do direct human research. But for me, that was a necessity. Doing library research, it's much faster, and get it done as everyone else has said. Get it done, get it finished. It's your last piece of student writing, and then after that, you're free to do whatever you want with it. You can teach, you can write, you can lecture, whatever you want, but you're finished. Right. And you've capped that off, and barring a head injury, nobody can take that from you.
I mean, this is more of a hiring thing, right?
Yeah.
Do you hire an ABD?
Well, I mean, all right. So I have to admit, I have maybe in this way I'm the most conservative of the group here. I agree with Priscilla. There's certain people that just simply cannot make it happen. Just cannot sit down and do it. I get that, and no respect lost. However, I see a lot of colleagues that we went to Nova Southeastern with that still put down PhD ABD, which is really to me a lie. You're not a PhD. You aren't. You aren't until you finish the dissertation. I'm the first one to say I think a dissertation is a stupid thing. We should get rid of it. But unfortunately, in today's world, it still exists. Therefore, my question is, do you have a thing on the wall from Nova Southeastern or from any other university that says, oh, PhD, all but dissertation? No, they don't give you a piece of paper that says that. Nobody gets a piece of paper that says that.
Yeah. And I would also add, I think ABD is growing as a worldwide phenomenon, but I think the United States might be one of the only places that will hire you ABD. I think other countries, you have to have the full credential
You got to
if
have
you
the
want to
full.
get hired. So it definitely is a hiring thing. Now, here's where the ABD thing I think really comes, factors in. Say, for instance, you happen to get really dang lucky and you get the best high paying job and you never need that doctoral degree. I had a friend in my cohort who landed a job before they did their dissertation, and the job doesn't use the degree, but it's a stable, high paying job, dream job kind of situation. So they made the choice not to do their dissertation. Totally cool. But if your goal is academia, you gotta finish it.
Oh, absolutely. And again, the other thing about the ABD and some of the people that we graduated from, and it's been over 10 years since we all graduated, most of us at least. If in most universities, all right, so you finish your qualifications exams, you have to take your 3 semesters of dissertation or more, depending. But your coursework only lasts for 5 to 7 years. After that, you have to retake coursework to be able to qualify again, to be able to take. So when I see somebody that I graduated with still using ABD and it's been 10 years, you're not even, no. I mean, and there's no way to make that cutoff and say, listen, you're not there anymore. Your coursework doesn't even count now. It grandfathered out. It's sundowned out. I think Nova Southeastern, I think it's 7 years, I believe. But there's somewhere it's 5. So to me, ABD is a deception. I know universities, a lot of universities will hire somebody ABD, but with the caveat that you must have completed your doctoral to maintain the position. You have to completed your doctoral degree by the time within a certain period of time, say 3 years.
Unless you want to adjunct the rest of your life.
Unless you want to adjunct for the rest of your life, and then you could do that. And all right, so the last question that came out actually from that was, student loans are a big issue for students in the United States. There's been a lot of talk about student loan forgiveness. Would not a better approach be, and this actually ties back to what we were talking about, instead of totally forgiving student loans, make student loans interest-free?
Okay, so somebody graduates 18, 19, well, I guess 20, 21, 22 with $40,000 in student loan debt. That first job may not pay enough towards that student loan. So they're carrying around a student loan debt. Now let's assume they're the average American consumer who's also running around with $10,000+ of credit card debt. Now they're paying credit card debt. They have a car, so probably, a car note. That already is a third, half, 3/4 of their paycheck. So while I do hear maybe it would be better if we just made them interest free, because that felt really great when we did it during the pandemic and the country didn't fall apart, though. I totally hear that. On the other hand, it's enough of a burden to a recent college graduate that it actually slows down our ability to become productive adults in the society. So the issue isn't necessarily about forgiveness or interest. What the whole point about forgiveness boils down to is the fact that as a society, we genuinely fucked up an entire generation of people because we said, if you want to be a good, upstanding adult citizen, you better go to college. Otherwise, you're a failure. Oh, by the way, now you have to pay back this loan that you didn't know what on earth you were doing when you were 18, right? So forgiveness is really about doing right. Now, going forward, would it make sense to change the system entirely? Yes. Interest-free is a good step in the right direction. Making college actually affordable, I think, is the real end solution, and that's not what we're setting up to do in a society at this point.
Yeah, but if you take away the interest, the payments come down.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, and you can pay it off eventually.
Right.
You
I will
can't
never pay
off
off my loan.
Well,
I'll
and
never
see,
pay
You're
it
and
off.
that's the issue.
That's
So
what
I
it
mean,
is. You're never paying it off.
I'll
the
never
fact
pay it off.
and the fact is that's really, I think, the issue. If you were in your 60s and said, "Well, I'm never going to be able to pay it off," and you had just gotten it, okay, I got it. Your loan is probably going to outlive you. But
Mhm.
I mean, somebody at your age, I would have expected to say, "Oh yeah, by the time I'm retirement age, I'll have this paid off,"
Mhm.
and hopefully you would, but you won't.
I won't.
That's kind of the whole thing. Scott, interest free. You think that's a
I-
viable option?
I think it's a huge stat. I don't know who's giving you that loan, but but it's great. I think it's a good thing to do. Why would somebody give you a loan without getting interest? What's in it for them?
You mean like with the United States citizen that gives the government an interest-free loan every year when they get money back on their taxes because they overpaid?
Are we getting money back anymore under the new tax laws? I know more people who used to get refunds who actually can't qualify for the refunds anymore under the new
Oh,
tax laws.
I have to admit, I haven't gotten a refund in 25 years. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's been
it's just, you just pay. But if people say, "Oh, I want that big refund." And I always tell them, you do understand you're giving the government an interest-free loan.
Yeah, I pay
You're-
a tax bill, in April. I owe taxes because
So
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would like it to come out break even. I would really like it if it was like only like $100 or $200 that I had to pay. Okay, fine. All right, I'll live with that. Of course, it's not. So, but whatever. Brooklyn,
And of course, because we lost our SALT deduction,
yes, we lost a lot of deductions.
our taxes have gone up.
We used to be able to claim
27.
our property taxes.
Yeah,
And now we can't.
and it's a big tax.
That's a huge tax. Brooklyn, interest free? You think that's the way to go?
Well, I think interest free is a good way to start. And I was thinking also about Priscilla's point of making college more affordable, and also thinking about when my Russian students, those who were alive, who were older and who were living during the Soviet time, they had no charge for their what they called a first education. And so some people might go to school for medical doctor, and then they would get their qualifications, and they would think, I really don't want to do this. I want to be a petroleum geologist. And I had a student actually who that was a decision that he made. So he went back for what is called a second education. And since he already had one education, his first education, paid for by the state, he needed to pay for his second education, which he did. And then he does well logging data, and he's a petroleum geologist, and he's happy. However, university professors earn literally about $4 American an hour, because the universities are run by the state. And yeah, exactly. The universities are run by the state. They're paid by the state. And that's what the state can afford to pay them. So their professors are aging out. I mean, the professors, it's hard to find somebody who's under 70 in a professor role in the university. I mean, they know their stuff. If you're going to be if you're actually going to be a PhD in Russia, you don't write one dissertation. You write one dissertation, you're a candidate. You then turn around and do 3 more years of research, write a second dissertation like you do in Germany, and then you're a full doctor. And you really know your stuff, and you're very highly respected by your students. But you're making about $4 US an hour, and that's it. And this is in Moscow, where costs are very high for apartments and things like that. So nobody wants to be a professor, of course, because the pay is too low. So then there comes a question of, and in New York, I think that now a community college education for for families for whom no one else has gone to college in the family, I believe, is free. I don't know if it's just the first 2 years is free, something like that. And I think that's great. It's tuition free. I don't know about books and stuff like that. But the question then becomes, if university is more affordable, then the people who are teaching university also need to be paid a living wage. So therefore the government or somebody needs to be able to bridge the gap, because it all can't be on the students, because their tuition would need to be lowered so that they don't have to take out 20 zillion loans, or they can come for free. I don't know. I mean, the system would have to change dramatically.
I agree. And, my thought on it is that, agreed with Scott, and really quickly, it can't be a loan company. We do have to change the education system. There's no doubt about that, especially the higher education system. And at the same time, I would say that when it comes to student loans, interest-free is a good way to go. I understand Priscilla's argument with young people. There's no doubt about that. I get it. But then again, it could be you don't start paying until after you're in the workforce for 5 years. There are different rules that could be put in there. It could be deferred for 5 years or whatever until they establish themselves, without interest being dumped onto them. And let's face it, with the amount of money that the federal government spends, there's your bank right there. If you want an educated electorate, which I know that some parties do not want, then the federal government probably should pony up. We spend plenty of money on the military. We spend plenty of money on all sorts of different things that are not necessary, that are just absolutely money being thrown away. And it's our money. And it's, in many ways, it's just like Social Security. We could have a tax, an education tax. There's a whole bunch of things that we could do and let the federal government interest-free fund these people's education. And I think that would go a long way. Having a loan company doing it, having a bank doing it is the last, because all they want to do is make money. They want to make money off it. All right, guys. Hey.
And by the way, that goes for healthcare too, right?
That goes for exactly. That goes for healthcare. Exactly. You're exactly right, Scott. It should be a right. It should not be a privilege. It should not. All right, guys. Great talking to you. We will talk to you again next week. So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of Nova Works, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, who is our editing partner, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. We'd also like to thank iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd also like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.